Can France's president find the way to connect with the yellow vests? We're into week 10 of a leaderless movement. Anyone who tries to pose as a leader of the yellow vests gets rejected. So with institutions like parliament, trade unions, the media weakened or discredited, what's Emmanuel Macron's answer? Well, to simultaneously pen a letter to every citizen and launch the Great National Debate. They're sort of town hall-style public hearings to list grievances. To get elected, Macron himself seized on the crumbling of France's traditional mainstream parties, but the president, himself a product of France's ruling elite systems, is now a target. Already he's drawn red lines, most notably refusing to revisit the partial scrapping of France's wealth tax. So what can emerge from this proposed mano a mano between the president and the people? More broadly, can France succeed in making its democracy more compatible with the times? Today in the France 24 debate, Macron asking citizens to list their demands. With us, Member of Parliament Paula Forteza of Macron's La République En Marche party. You represent the French abroad in your constituencies in Latin America.
Exactly.
Welcome to the show. Welcome as well to sociologist Jen Schrady, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, and your area of interest particularly is digital activism.
Yes, I study digital democracy, digital activism, and social movements and social media.
All right, well, welcome back. Welcome to Yves Saint-Omer, who teaches political science at the University of Paris 8 and is the author of Participatory Budgeting in Europe, Democracy and Public Governance.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. And we welcome as well Pierre Gilbert, journalist at the online news outlet Le Vent se lève, The Wind Rises. Of course, Le Vent se lève was also the title of the Ken Loach film,
Exactly.
the Wind That Shakes the Barley. Was there an inspiration there?
It was part of our inspiration, yes.
So a left-wing, definitely a left-wing imprint on your website.
Can say that.
Okay. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. No subject will be taboo, promises Emmanuel Macron. On the eve of the first of those grands débats public hearings, the French president sending out that letter to all citizens. More on that from Alexander Alcott.
A letter of more than 2,000 words to begin the big debate with the people. Words printed in French newspapers this Monday. Emmanuel Macron says that for him, no questions are off limits, although there are some limits to what he's willing to do. As an example, the first question is about taxation. The French president asks which taxes the people think should be lowered first, but he says he'll remain faithful to his campaign manifesto and ruled out rolling back his pro-business economic reforms, such as scrapping a wealth tax. He goes further in asking about institutional changes, asking if blank ballots should be recognized and if voting should be made compulsory, and how proportional should voting be. The president rules nothing out, knowing that some parties are calling for full proportional representation. He asks, should France use referendums more often, and who should be able to trigger them? In direct response to one of the demands of the Yellow Vest protesters. And he goes on to ask, in terms of immigration, do you want us to set annual targets? The president says he's happy to hear public opinion on this highly sensitive subject that adds a lot of wind to the sails of the far right. Macron said proposals made during the debate will help build a new contract for the nation and influence government policy making. And after weeks of Yellow Vest protests, he says he hopes to turn anger into solutions.
So, Paula Forteza, last year, Macron initiated, along with other European leaders, town hall-style meetings on the subject of Europe. Those kind of didn't go very far. We never really heard much about it after they were launched. Why will it be different this time?
This time it's a national debate on issues that are of interest for every citizen, and we will have the participation of the whole civil society. So we will have mayors, we will have unions, we will have associations, MPs, everyone is mobilized. And I think that what we're trying to do is to reinvent a new form of democracy. There's a huge demand for more participation. There's a huge demand for a reform of the institutions, and this will be the laboratory where these ideas will emerge.
More participation, what do you mean by that?
more participation from citizens in the decision making, in the political decision making.
So what, more referendums?
For instance, we will have a constitutional reform that will come after the debates, and we are open to discuss about referendum, about a petition right, about any kind of mechanisms that will make that there's a more fluid dialogue between citizens and political representatives.
Because they had a big referendum in Britain 2 years ago, and the country has been torn apart by the Brexit vote, with divisions within both the main political parties. Lots of referendums. Is that a good idea?
We will learn about these experiences, and we will try to have the trade-offs and make the good institutional architecture, so that we don't use it as a populist incentive, but more as a way to enrich our political action.
Is this a first step on the road to? I know the leader of the far left party, the Unbowed France, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He's been calling for citizens' initiatives. Is this the first step on the way? Having this great national debate?
Well, I don't think so. I can recognize that mayor and elected MP, for example, are doing a great job to make it open to the most of people as possible. So I can recognize that. But I think I'm quite pessimistic about the issues of this referendum, because for me, Macron is creating a huge expectative about this grand débat, and for me, it's impossible that he can
meet the expectations.
No expectation for the people, because now all the media are saying that this grand débat is the moment or never to put issues on table and to deal with them and find solutions. But I think Macron is not able to find solutions, because when you read, for example, his letter, he puts some condition of this grand débat, some really full condition. For example, he said that what savings should we make to follow the taxes? It means that we can discuss about what we want, but you have to stay in this budget, and that's not what the people want. People want to more public services.
France
for
has a
example.
very high level of public debt. So if you're going to lower taxes, you can't at the same time all the time raise expenditures, right?
Well, I'm not agreeing with this logical, because it's not logical. For example, we know that in France, and the Yellow Jacket also know that we have, for example, 80 billions of euro that are just flying because of fiscal evasion.
Tax evasion.
Yeah, tax
So
evasion.
you're talking about different ways of raising money, but okay, all that can be put up for
No,
discussion
there
during
is
these. But won't that come up though? You think during this great national debate?
Yeah, this argument is all over on the social network, for example. So I think
You're alarmed by the fact that it wasn't in his letter.
Yeah, in this letter, Macron explained that we can't touch at the budget. The budget has to be balanced. So it's not possible for him to go to make a concrete reform if he wants to put the money on the table. So I'm quite pessimistic about
the kickoff of this all. This letter written to the French. It's the third time under the current constitution that's happened. The two previous times it was incumbent presidents who were running for re-election who sent these letters out, François Mitterrand and Nicolas Sarkozy. This one comes long before another election. So what do you make of that letter, Yves Saint-Omer, and how do you think it bodes for the way the discussion will take place?
I mean, I'm not in the head of Emmanuel Macron, and I can't tell exactly. But when you look from the outside, you recognize that it is a bit contradictory, on the one hand, to say we open the debate and everything will be possible, which is not really true, but at least there is this idea that we open the floor to any proposal. And then to be the one who say, I open the debate and I will draw the conclusions of the debate. in a climate of huge distrust, you should offer guarantees that the debate will be neutral, then you will have good methodologies to draw the synthesis of the debate, and that at the end of the debate, decisions will be taken which won't rest only on the goodwill of the president, who is at the time being highly contested.
So he said in the letter, no subject is taboo. Should he have, was he right to say that? Or, because you talked about managing expectations here.
I mean, in Europe, sociological research shows that the people who enter in processes of participatory democracy much often get out of these processes with more distrust than before. Because when you raise expectations, and that's the result.
And this will raise expectations.
Yeah, sure. France is in a huge crisis. The president says this is a way to get out of this crisis. But if you don't do it rightly, then the danger is that you get out of this big debate with more distrust than before.
All right, one of those weighing in on the method that the president has employed in this talk of more citizens' referendums is Emmanuel Macron's predecessor as president, François Hollande, speaking Sunday in northern France.
I believe that the possibility of resorting to referendums should be extended, as it was hoped, so that there are no excessively restrictive conditions on the part of citizens. But as everyone will have understood, we cannot consult on everything, and soon against everything, and hold referendums on all subjects, and in particular on subjects that are part of the Republic's achievements.
Is this just a big talk shop, or is there really thinking going on about how French democracy works?
That's the million-dollar question. What actually is democracy? Is it elections? Is it voting? Is it posting a tweet? And I think what the tricky thing here is that if we look at other examples of participatory budgeting, right? So in some ways, that's what we're talking about here, right? Macron is talking about where should the money come from and where should the money go, right? So Brexit clearly was the example that certainly that was a broader question around whether or not the UK should leave the EU. But if we look at budgeting, the country of Brazil, for example, 30 years ago, kind of launched this movement that has spread around the world around citizens engaging in this discussion around the budget. But the problem here is that we don't really have a clear process. So what we've learned from successful participatory budgeting programs around the world is that it really takes a very clear process to get people involved. Now, a lot of people have said, well, you know, Macron may or may not do anything with what issues come up, and that's something that we need to consider. But we also need to consider what the process is. Just saying that these meetings are open to everyone doesn't mean that people will show up. And what the research shows is that we really need a longer-term plan for community organizing to really get people to the actual table and also feel comfortable speaking up.
Is it doable?
I think that right now we are at a really incredible point in French history, and I think anything is possible. And a lot depends not just on Macron. I think so much has focused on Macron, but really he represents the elite and the criticisms that people are waging around inequality. And whether or not it's doable, I think, is less to do with Macron and people in government and more to do with the people who are organizing.
Jen Trady, what would you say to Paula Forteza, who's helping to organize these town hall-style debates, about the fact that if at the end of the day you have more referendums and more citizens' initiatives, isn't that undermine a bit the power of legislators?
So the question about referendum is more than the idea of Brexit, right? So I come from California, and we have a slew of referendums on every ballot. And it is mind-boggling, and a lot of them are around funding. Should there be a tax on X to fund Y? And it's been a complete and utter disaster because to get on the referendum, there are a lot of corporate interests that have affected that, as well as a lot of advertising dollars that have gone into that process as well. So I think that's a really big risk that something like a referendum faces in terms of what is the campaign going to actually be around them.
Regarding participation, as we speak, there are surveys that show that we will have at least 40% of French citizens participating. This is up to 20 million French citizens. This is huge. I've been studying also participatory initiatives, civic tech movements, open
Could France become
movements.
California in what Jen describes?
This debate is unique. It's the first time that we will reach this amount of citizens. So it's the first time we do something like that. Of course, the methodology will have to evolve. I would love to have this kind of debates every year. I think we need to have this continuous democracy.
But there's two things, right? There's the
Yeah.
debates on the one hand, and then there's what comes out of it. And if we have more referendums, such as the types that Pierre Gilbert is touting, Yves Saint-Omer.
But the problem in California is not the referendum or the citizen initiative per se. The problem is the money in politics, both for elections and for citizen initiatives and referendum. So the problem is to avoid that corporate interests through the money. I mean, not destroy politics, but make politics a game where those with the money are the winner, usually at least. If you take in Europe, Switzerland, where the money is also a problem, but you can't say that Switzerland is a badly governed country when you compare it to France. So I guess that it's important to have a lot of citizen initiatives and referendum, because when you have only once upon a time, the Brexit is a good example also, people vote not only or even not mainly
On
to
the
answer
issue.
the question, the issue.
They'll answer a different question.
Those who
We're
who raise a question.
We're going to pick up on these points when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.
An exceptional sparkling wine, a symbol of celebration the world over. This week, France in Focus invites you to discover champagne. Don't miss it on France 24 and France24.com. Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Welcome back. Before we resume the France 24 debate, some of the stories we're following for you in the newsroom. Gdansk's longtime mayor succumbs to his stab wounds. Liberal Pavel Adamovich attacked during a charity event Sunday evening in the Polish port city. Authorities are assessing whether the suspect is fit to stand trial. This Monday evening, there's been a vigil in Gdansk for the mayor. Cesare Battisti back in Italy. The former radical leftist militant denies the murder of 4 in the 1970s. He was extradited from Bolivia after years in exile, first in France, then in Brazil. Theresa May urges Parliament to give her EU divorce deal a second look. We're on the eve of a vote she's widely expected to lose. The Conservatives' chief whip resigns his post, saying he cannot support the agreement. Donald Trump denies confiscating his interpreter's notes during a one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin. The U.S. president lashes out again at the FBI for reportedly investigating whether the U.S. president is a Russian agent. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're into week 10 of the Yellow Vests movement in this country, and on the eve of what French daily newspaper Le Monde wonders will be the event that could maybe or not kickstart the presidency of Emmanuel Macron, a great national debate, un grand débat, where citizens are asked to air their grievances. Doléances is the term borrowed from the French Revolution. We're talking about it with Member of Parliament Paula Forteza of Emmanuel Macron's La République En Marche party, sociologist Jen Schrady of the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po, Yves Saint-Omer, who teaches at the University of Paris 8, and Pierre Gilbert of Le Vent se lève, the online news medium, or Le Vent se lève, the wind rises. How do you translate it into English?
The wind is rising, yeah.
The wind is rising, okay.
It's a big program.
There you go. It's, by the way, I just want to talk about this, Pierre. It's not just journalists who've been targeted. On Saturday, a camera crew from the cable news network LCI assaulted during the Yellow Vest movement during the protests. Their bodyguards seriously hurt. Many camera crews now need security detail to cover the demonstrations. Last Saturday, the Yellow Vests blocked the printing press of Burgundy's leading regional newspaper, Lyon Républicaine, preventing it from hitting the newsstands. The press being targeted, so just as politicians are being targeted. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think press now is making, they're put in the same camp that politicians, like all this stuff is the system, you know, so that creates some conflicts in as we have said. That's a pity that journalists are aggressed like that. But I think that some of those protesters are not really understanding what is the press job and what is a media job.
Why is that?
Because, for example, they are putting an equivalent signal between, for example, BFM TV, which is a big
cable news television station,
big direct cable news, who has an editorial line which is, we have to say it, hostile to the yellow jacket movement, and other medias that media that just trying to creating news and to making analysis. So this great confusion, it's of course not a good things for the democratic debate, because we know that media have a very important role. So the fourth power.
The fourth estate, some call them. Jen Schrady, there's the feeling that, well, you don't need the media anymore, the traditional media. Is that what explains this?
That's kind of was the initial utopian hype around the internet, right? We no longer need the media and everyone is a citizen journalist. But the problem is that what I and others have found in our research, it takes a lot of work and time to generate stories, right? Producers here spend a lot of time, journalists spend a lot of time doing the work that they need to do. And the internet hasn't replaced it, but the risk that we face is that always, certainly we need to protect journalists, absolutely, and I condemn the violence. The challenge right now is that both the media and individuals are so prone to repost violent images, right? We're drawn to it, right? And so the problem is that these kind of outliers or violent images don't really represent the Yellow Vest movement overall. It's a part of it, and we shouldn't ignore it. It needs to be covered. But we have to also put things in perspective, right? So there's a kind of American journalist saying, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So we put the violence first in the reporting. And again, this is not just a question of journalists. Everyone is doing it. And I think we really need to be mindful when we talk about the movement, especially a movement like the Yellow Vest movement, which is so broad and there's so many parts of it, not to just call it overall a violent movement.
A broad movement, a chance, as Paula Forteza was saying, to perhaps redefine the way French democracy works. And just as citizens were poring over Macron's letter, the Yellow Vests are showing that they're not going to go away during the 3 months of consultation, some 100 of them blocking the main highway north of the southwestern city of Toulouse as the week began. The blockade at a toll booth started late Sunday, was eventually lifted after morning rush hour. More on the Yellow Vests and this great national debate from Marios Sofos.
Papers in hand, these Yellow Vest protesters reacted sceptically to President Emmanuel Macron's open letter to the French people, as he launches a national debate over his government's policies.
It's window dressing. As Macron has done up till now, he's making promises, things that don't hold up. I think it was done with the European elections in mind.
Amongst the issues raised in the French president's letter, where to find the money to better finance public services. Some here already have the answer.
We know that there are businesses and people with big salaries who are not contributing the way they should. That, to me, seems to be the priority.
The president has, however, refused to re-examine tax reforms. Last October, after scrapping a wealth tax and lowering the rate on capital gains, he was accused by opponents of being a president of the rich. Though immigration has not been central to the Yellow Vest movement, Macron did address the issue in his letter, with him asking whether annual targets should be set once France has fulfilled its asylum obligations.
When it comes to migration, we can't reject people who are facing problems. If they're political refugees, we're a country that provides asylum, that's true. Perhaps, though, there's a given time and we need a quota, because unfortunately we can't take in all of humanity's misery.
Elsewhere, some protesters half-heartedly acknowledged Macron's letter and pledged to pick up their own pens in response.
He made the effort, the small effort of writing the letter, which he should have done a long time ago. I'm going to respond to this letter point by point and send it to the Élysée Palace.
President Macron made clear there was no question of him resigning, saying the debate was neither an election nor a referendum.
Election or a referendum. Paula Forteza, it's the Yellow Vest, the subject that comes up the most often. You talked about justice, what's equitable, especially when it comes to taxes. What's your experience from your constituents? Is that the number one issue? Because there's been a talk about a lot of different subjects. Is taxes number one?
It is one of the issues. We also have everything that's linked to mobility for French people, that they can go back and forth and still have the same rights. There's the education issue. We have a lot of very nice lycée schools,
High
French
schools.
schools all over the world that are paid apart from it by the state. So that they want to preserve that. But I would like to come back to what was being said about media, because I think it's the same issue between regarding the violence against media and the violence against politicians. The question behind it is, can we live in a completely disintermediated world? We come back and forward on this issue. We think that online we will be able to go across media, and that we won't need any more journalists. And we also think sometimes...
And is Emmanuel Macron part of the problem? Because, again, it's this, I'm going to talk with you guys directly. I'm writing this letter. I don't need the media to do it. I don't need the legislators to do it.
No, but what I think is that people realize at the end of the day that it is a full-time job, that you need time to write the bills, that you need time to study, to have a political and democratic debate, to deliberate. And they just want to participate and to be heard, but they don't want, at the end of the day, to eliminate representatives or to eliminate journalists. And there's a polemic, ongoing polemic around these issues, but when you put them in front of the final decision, they all come back to this representative issue. The Yellow Jacket are starting to elect representatives after a few months saying that they wouldn't want representatives, and saying that anyone who speaks in the name of the Gilets jaunes, is a traitor. Now they're starting to get organized. So organically, we go back to this need of intermediaries that need to be more open, of course, and more open to dialogue, but we can't do without them, I think.
Yves Saint-Omer, you agree?
Only partly. I mean, it's quite clear that democracy can be reduced to grassroots movements like the Gilets jaunes. They've brought a lot of things, a huge debate, a debate as we didn't have in France since years. On the other hand, politics can't be reduced to representative democracy. I think that we have to find a political system which will fit with this century. It was invented decades ago. Society has changed a lot. I mean, social networks, the society is quite different. We need also to adapt our political system, and I think that we have to play on various dimensions. So nobody really seriously wants to abolish elections here in France. But a lot of
Because
people...
right now, when you look at from the outside at the political landscape of France, you have the sense that it's reduced to the yellow vests and the president and nothing in between.
Because in France we have no counterpower. We have the more unequal political system where all the power is in the hands of the president. We need to change this. We can't remain with this outdated... it has been called a Republican
Will it
king.
change now with what's going on?
I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not. And so we have also to have intermediaries like unions, which were not well considered in the first year of Macron's presidency, and we have to give some power directly to the people through citizen initiative, through citizen assembly, randomly selected, as it was the case in Ireland. The Irish people have decided to make abortion legal, and the proposal came from a citizen assembly, randomly selected among citizens, and then it was passed through the parliament to the referendum at large. I think we need to invent a lot of things which have been experimented elsewhere.
Pierre Gilbert, are we on the cusp of perhaps a new era for democracy in France?
I hope so, but I don't think that Macron will lead to that, unfortunately. I agree with Yves Saint-Omer. We need to rebuild a representative system, a unique one, maybe a French way to combine representation and direct democracy. Our people is a kind of pioneer in this matter, so I think the challenge is really exciting. But
because the joke is that the French like revolution but don't like reform.
Well, let's make revolution.
Yeah, so let's make revolution easy. Well, let's hope that this moment of grand débat will make the consciousness of the people go further. But I think mostly that the frustration at the end of the grand débat, because Macron, for me, I just explained it, but will not satisfy those demands. But I think this frustration can be kind of constructive after, maybe in some years, maybe I don't know, but for the people to empower themselves and to propose maybe after other solutions.
Jen Trady, when you look at, for instance, neighboring Italy, where the party that got the most votes is one that called for these citizens' initiatives, the Five Star Movement, and they said they would bring democracy to the people. Which way is it going to go when it comes to France if you raise the expectations that the system can be changed?
I think that, again, what we're facing is such a broad movement that it's really difficult to say. And in fact, I think what's happening is, yes, this is a populist movement. But the problem is that lately, if we look at how academics and journalists are discussing populism, it tends to be kind of pigeonholed into a very right-wing populism rather than a broader spectrum. And what we're looking at, I think, in France, which I agree is a different case than some of these other countries, is that while the role of the internet is important, also what's happening offline is very key and really critical. And that the really important issue in France that has been very narrow is this question of economic inequality. The problem is that Macron a number of times has alluded to the fact that he doesn't believe that people are working hard enough, right? We need to change the tax structure to encourage people to work. On the other hand, we have the Gilets jaunes saying we're working really, really hard and we're not able to survive. And the question of what's going to happen is how that problem is going to be resolved.
And you were saying to us, you were in the southwestern city of Toulouse the last couple of days. What were people telling you there?
So Toulouse, while it's gotten some coverage, hasn't gotten as much coverage as Paris. But the left has been very active in Toulouse. One of the kind of formations that has been involved is Nuit Debout. There have been general assemblies as well.
Nuit Debout, which was sort of the French equivalent of Occupy Wall Street last year.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is, when I first moved here, I had done research in the U.S. beforehand on the Occupy movement. And as I began to look at what was happening in Europe, there were other similar movements, indignados in Spain. And then as I began to study it, nothing had really happened in France substantively around the same time. And I think what the issue is that France was able to, at that point, again, around 2011, kind of buffer itself against the worldwide economic recession in terms of people's individual survival, right, because of the benefits that people faced. And I think, what we're facing now is, in many ways, the French Occupy movement, the French indignados, although it has a very different and more broad sweeping characterization.
All right, Pierre Gilbert, pessimistic or skeptical of Emmanuel Macron's ability to listen and be the one who enacts the reforms. On Tuesday, the president will be traveling to the town of Grand Bourteroule, that's near Rouen, in Normandy, to kick off the grand national debate. We'll see what sort of a reception he gets there. You see it on the map. It's northwest of Paris. On his rare public outing since the movement started, Macron has gotten an earful, like last Wednesday when he traveled to the Paris suburb of Créteil to wish good luck to France's handball team en route to Germany to defend its world title. Outside, there were a mix of trade unionists and yellow vests protesting wherever the president went. And it seems, Paul Forteza, there's a bit of a bunker mentality. The president has canceled his trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos. This president, is he going to stay more and more at the Élysée Palace, or are we going to see him back out, doing presidential stuff, going to ceremonies and out meeting and greeting people?
He's launching tomorrow this grand debate, and he's going to go all over France to mobilize people. So he's going to be out there participating, and
we'll see him more out and about in public.
Yes, and I think regarding what was said before, there will be these popular assemblies with people that are taken to select what the proposals will be. So there will be this guarantee of impartiality coming from civil society. We're really working on the methodology, and we're really working on new ways of, as we said before, reconnect representative democracy with direct democracy. And I really think we can do something new in France, and kind of, as we did before in history, innovate in democratic terms and be maybe the first in the world.
Does the president have to change his tone, though, when he says things like, "Go cross the street and you'll get a job"? Those kinds of remarks, does he have to reel those back?
He's done his mea culpa. He said he would change his style. He said he would work on himself, and I really think there will be a second part of his mandate that will have another tone. And we have to remember that the Gilets jaunes movement is still a minimal part of the French citizens. Now he wants to talk not only to the Gilets jaunes, but to the whole French citizen with this great debate. So, and he wants to make them responsible also. We will not be able to spend forever. We will have to choose. We'll have to prioritize. And all these exercises will be done in the next few weeks.
Yves Saint-Omer, one final point on this. This is a president elected last year and whose reforms follow what he promised on the campaign trail. He's not changed, he's not broken promises, and yet there's this groundswell against him.
Because the problem is not only to reconnect, it is to reset. I think that there is something much deeper which has to be done. It's a third president elected freedomly, who after 1 year, 18 months, is very down in the polls. So I think that we have to do much more. And if really millions of people do participate in this big debate, who will, at the end, make the synthesis and decide? If there is no credible answer to this question, I think that this will be a mess and will go in directions that will be very dangerous. I mean, in Italy, it was also because after the Five Stars movement, the political system didn't change. And the result is this very bad situation in Italy that we have now.
All right, that'll be the final word for now. 3 months it's going to last. Yves Saint-Omer, I want to thank you. I want to thank Paula Forteza, Pierre Gilbert, Jen Schrady. Stay with us, please. Media Watch is next.